Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Hoffman, the founder of IZZY, alongside Dorit Inbar, who's the executive director of Israel's new fund for cinema and television, one of the 5 main film funds in Israel, also known as the NFCT. And we're coming to you from Tel Aviv in a conversation with somebody who you might not get to meet or see, on the big screen, so to speak, but definitely a major player in the space, both Dorit and her experience, which I'll tell you about today, also the NFCT as one of the main film funds in Israel. And we really look forward to bringing you more of the characters and the different players in the Israeli entertainment industry, not just the people that you see on the big screen. So Dorit, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And tell us first, just for context, what's your background? What have you been doing for the last 30 years?
So first I was born in Israel. I have 4 kids, 3 biological and 1 additional shelf product, and the most beloved, and a cat, of course. I was born and I was raised in a very small town in the south of Israel, and but for the past decades I live in Tel Aviv. After the army, I studied law and I became a lawyer, and it went on until I became a partner in a law firm in Tel Aviv, and then I felt I had enough, and I went on and I specialized in communications. And the next step for me was to be appointed by the Minister of Communications to be the head of the Council for multi-channel television in Israel, which is cables and satellite. I did that for 4 years, and this was a crucial time because all the platforms went then from analog to digital, and many channels and VOD, and another thing that happened during that time was that the infrastructure served not only for materials, but everything was actually was converted into one digital sign, which was used for as infrastructure for telephony, and so it meant a lot for the competition in Israel. So these were interesting times, and since then I did a series of other jobs in the industry, from commercial television to the general public television and radio in Israel, and other stuff. And for the past almost 12 years now, I'm running a film fund, the new fund for cinema and television. And this is apart from doing some other things like serving as a board member in various companies and NGOs in Israel, mainly in the cultural area, but also, for example, I served as a member of the board of the Israeli electricity company, and so I have a diverse background.
Sounds exciting.
Thank you. It is.
So talk to us about what attracted you to Israeli cinema, TV, entertainment. It sounds like you have a lot of opportunities, but being the executive director of the NFCT, what attracted you to that position, to the industry in general?
Cinema and television, and actually all video materials, doesn't matter what platforms they are shown at, I think are the most important materials in the world these days, and it's not new. It's the same for years now, and it's not only because it's the easiest to use. It's also a very compelling material that draws the attention of both young and old people. And as such, it has a huge influence on people. And so it's not only the art, and it's certainly the 21st century's art, the art, of the 21st century. But it's not only that. It's also communication. It's also transferring and spreading knowledge. It's also creating understanding and not only understanding but also tolerance. And it doesn't mean necessarily that people will change their opinions, but the effect of these materials is so strong and not only logical. It's not only picking your brains. It also goes to the heart, and it has an emotional influence. So it's a very, very strong tool to educate. And when I say educate, I say it very cautiously, because in Hebrew, educate serves as a bit
condescending, maybe?
not condescending, but like an elite term,
right,
that is used to superiorize on other people.
Right.
And while maybe the American or the British term is more humble and says, let me offer a different point of view to you that you may not have knew before. And in that sense, it's so important. So for me, this was the most compelling thing: the fact that it serves so many people and so many groups and so many issues and so many dilemmas and so many challenges, and it allows people to speak up. And actually, it's the best way for freedom of speech to be executed. And freedom of speech is the basis for democracy.
correct.
Now, freedom of speech and democracy, this sounds like big words and full of hot air, and what is this bullshit, and so on. But truly, we speak now on our lives, and this is our time to fight for the way we live now, and our children will live, and our grandchildren will live after us. And the fight for democracy and the fight for liberalism and the fight for freedom of speech is crucial. And this is how, for the past 10 years, we found ourselves a rather small film fund at the battlefield, at the edge of the fight for freedom of speech, because every second film is a fight.
Right.
And the fight is also to educate for tolerance, to teach people that they should allow others to speak up and say, and even if you don't agree,
Right.
you must fight for the other's right to speak up.
Yeah.
And films are very important in that sense.
There's points, different people, different backgrounds. We feel that's a core part of our mission to enhance the world's relationship with Israel, that sometimes you only see certain viewpoints or certain aspects of Israeli culture and society that's shown abroad, whether it's the IDF, whether it's the religious aspects of this country, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And anyone that's been here for even a short period of time knows there's so much more than those things. Those things exist, and often they exist in significant amounts, but there's also arts and entertainment and food and fashion and history and all types of other things that have nothing to do with conflict and war and friction. And so the second thing you said that really resonates with us too is, everyone should have a fair opportunity to express themselves and express their art. And we look at ourselves as a platform, not a channel. A channel has a very clear, focused agenda or viewpoint that they want to share with their audience, and that's fine. We look at it and we say, we're not the ones who say this Israeli filmmaker can tell his story, but this one can't because we agree with his political viewpoints or his religious viewpoints, but we don't agree with hers, or vice versa. To us, anyone can come to IZZY and build on the platform. Regardless of your viewpoints, regardless of your upbringing, where you come from, Israeli, Palestinian, American, Argentinian, Jewish, not Jewish, religious, not religious, old, young, and let the audience be the judge of the art, of the stories, and the message. And like you said, you're not trying to change anyone's mind. You're just trying to expose people to things that they may not normally be exposed to in an artistic way. And by doing so, that creates knowledge, and knowledge creates interest. It doesn't mean you have to love Israel, it doesn't mean you have to hate Israel, but the more that you're knowledgeable about Israel and all of Israel, not just those few things, the more interest you'll develop. And instead of saying, Israel's bad, Israel's good, I love Israel, I hate Israel, you'll say, Israel's complex, Israel's nuanced. And you'll be less gung-ho to provide such a quick and knee-jerk reaction to something that clearly, even for people like you and me, you've been living here your whole life, I'm here 7 years, we don't even have the answers to a lot of the questions that come up within Israeli society because they are very nuanced and complex. But at least you can create a bigger conversation than versus, saying, oh, well, Israel's, a bully, or Israel's the best thing ever. Because we know those things aren't true. Israel's not a bully, and Israel's not the best thing ever. And I think by having a fund like yours, we're excited to work with you and all the funds. And I want to ask you about the funds because...
Just before you ask me about the funds, I wanted to address a few things that you said. And the first point is, you talked about the way Israel is shown in the world. And, cinema in general has various aspects. It's art. It's also an industry. It provides for thousands of people in Israel, tens of thousands of people in Israel. It's also a very good ambassador for Israel around the world, and we speak especially about people who don't come to Israel, and many of them will never set a foot in Israel.
Correct.
Their entire lives. So the only way for them to learn about Israel is either through the news, which is, of course, soldiers and God knows what, and politics, and seeing films. And films, because they're so diverse, they offer the opportunity to learn about the variety, to learn about the richness and the complexity of the society and this culture and the history of it. And this brings on the table great phenomena and great films, and people can judge for themselves. And the more you see, the more you can judge. But we is exactly like IZZY. We not only do not judge or create a very narrow stage only for the opinions we support, but on the opposite, we call for proposals from many groups in society, and I'll tell you about it in a minute. How many projects we have that are thematic and are characterized by the filmmakers, and not necessarily by the theme of the films. And this is because we are trying so much to find people who are coming from diverse groups and sometimes marginal groups in society, people that usually will not get a stage and will not get a mic.
Interesting. Right. So let's talk about the concept of film funds in Israel.
Right.
As you mentioned, there's 5 major film funds. There's also some smaller ones in Jerusalem and other parts of the country. Explain to somebody that is not familiar with Israeli film funds, what's the concept, what's the relationship between the government and the film funds, what's the relationship between the film funds and the filmmakers. Take us through the entire ecosystem.
Okay. Actually, the funds are part of the entire system of how do you fund filmmaking in Israel. For the Americans who are coming from the United States, this would be really, really strange, because in the States there is no such things like governmental budgets for filmmaking. But in some other countries, this system exists, and there are various changes in that. Here in Israel, the government supports art, and the government supports filmmaking specifically. The amount is rather small. The governmental budget for filmmaking is now something like 103 million shekels per annum, which is, I don't know, it's like $27 million
like that
for a year. And this includes everything. It includes filmmaking, includes support archives and cinematheques and guilds. So it's not only for filmmaking. Filmmaking is, of course, smaller. And this money is separated between among five film funds, which each one of them specializes in specific fields or genres. There is one film fund which supports only full-length features, for example. There is another one that does just a bit of everything. We specialize in documentaries, but not only. We also support narrative films, and we also support students' films and animations. We are also quite diverse, but our claim to fame is documentaries. And I claim that everything is documentary, even the feature films. Most of the feature films are always based on real stories, because reality is so crazy and so much more interesting than whatever you could invent. So this is what the film funds do. Now, film funds are forbidden from investing the whole 100% of the budget, mostly, except some specific filmmaking, which is, for example, the students. But usually they are forbidden. So there must be other sources. Now, once upon a time, when I was the regulator for multi-channel television in Israel, I made the decision that TV channels are also requested to invest in filmmaking in Israel. So for documentaries, for example, there are until today two sources. One, usually it comes up to 60% of the budget will come from the TV channels, and 40%, up to 40%, will come from the funds, from the television funds. When it comes to narrative films, it's a bit more complicated. 80% will come from a fund, and it's very, very hard, like everywhere else. It's very hard to find budgets. There are some investors who are commercial. They do this for business, and this is great. This is just amazing.
You're looking at one of them right here. No, just kidding.
Good for us.
Yeah.
Good for all of us that such people exist and such organizations exist.
Yeah.
Because filmmakers can't do that. Like, you need to have a mecenate for every art in the world, and it used to be like that from the Renaissance days, or even from long before the Renaissance. So this money is very, very crucial. Now, what is very important about the funds in Israel, and in that sense are different from other countries, is that the funds are not governmental. At least these five. They are NGOs, amutot, meaning that they are non-profit organizations, but they are independent. And this is very, very important, especially during the past several years, where a huge pressure was imposed by governmental officers and politicians on the content, and the funds served as a buffer between them and the filmmakers and prevented this influence. And this was very, very important thing, again, for freedom of speech, to allow people to speak up. And it's not that easy to allow different views and different opinions. Sometimes it's very annoying, but this is where freedom of speech is judged. It's very easy to be very liberal when it goes to to children's material or to classical music, but when it goes to politics, and sometimes even films about food would be politics,
right.
Even dances, even just everything. So this is very, very complicated. And we look constantly for filmmakers who come from, as I told you, from marginal groups. We invest a lot of work in, for example, ultra-religious filmmakers, which, of course, are always female filmmakers. You know that in the ultra-religious society, the husbands, the men study, and the wives, they provide for the family. And we try to find these women who are interested in telling stories and just showing us what is going on there on the other side of the wall, and hand them a hand to our world. And I can tell you that in one of these groups, when it was finished, one of them stood up and said to me, Dorit, I literally thought you have horns when we started this project. And so this is extremely important group. Or, for example, we have projects for people with severe physical disabilities who stay at home and can't get out, and we teach them script writing, and we introduce them to the industry, and we work very hard to create their films. We have projects for immigrants from Ethiopia and from ex-USSR, Russia, and we have films for minorities. We have projects for minorities, for Arabs and Druze and Bedouins, and on and on and on. I could go on like that with you forever. And this all serves as a platform for these people, not only to create great films, and you could see that these films are sometimes, they get just anywhere. I just to give you one example, the film Five Broken Cameras, which we started with, and we introduced to the Palestinian filmmaker a Jewish producer, and together we set a mentor to them, who was Dutch. And from a film that was planned to be like 10 minutes film for the memory of the friend of the filmmaker, it was a film that went to the Oscars and ended up among the 5 documentaries of 2014. And this was their first film. It just wasn't among the 5 top documentaries for that year. Or another example, there is Forever Pure. Forever Pure is a film that was made by a young immigrant coming from Russia. And she made a film about the most racist soccer team in Jerusalem, called Beitar Yerushalayim, and Forever Pure is their slogan, and Forever Pure is exactly what you think it is. And she made a great film. First, it's a great art. Second, it's great soccer. Third, it's one of the most important films. It made a huge change. Single-handed, this film changed the culture of this whole club.
Yeah.
And last but not least, among so many other prizes, it won the Emmy last year. So, and this was first-time filmmaker. And I could go on with so many examples. So
I'm curious to know, if you can take us through sort of the selection process, right? You have a call for entries. Is there just bullet point criteria that they have to meet? Is it the eye test? Is it both? Is there a panel that decides? How do you take films through a process that basically says, yes, we're going to fund that, or no, we're going to pass on that?
It depends. First, it depends. It depends in the sources of the money on our budget. Now, 2/3 of our budget comes from the governmental budget, and 1/3 comes from fundraising and from partnerships between us and people and organizations that share the same values with us, or some of the values. Usually, they do not deal with, or they have nothing to do with filmmaking at all, and with this industry. But they understand the importance and the strength of such films, and they understand the value of such films to promote their causes as well. So they share budgets with us, and this allows us to create many such projects and support more filmmakers. And even then, we support approximately 3% of the proposals served to us,
Wow.
which is a disaster.
3%.
Yes. Now, this is, I get headache just thinking about it. Every round, every general round, for example, every general round of the documentary projects that we have, that people are allowed to file. Guys, you could file proposals in the middle of the night through our website. It's open. And so every such round is approximately 150 proposals.
Wow.
And they deal with just everything, my relationship with my mother, the Holocaust, food, cats, you name it, just everything, environmental, elderly, everything. And from every such 100 plus proposals, we support 3-4 proposals, which is heartbreaking, because it's not that everything is good, but certainly there are many more goods than that we could select if we only had the money. And the more money we have, the tell you how we really select the proposals. We have a project now with Val Bloch, Society and Racism and Minorities and Immigration. And they set approximately $100,000 every year for that cause. And these $100,000 would bring every year 2 films, one narrative and one documentary. And the more films we have, then we have such a library on the theme, and the theme will be served by so many films from different angles, different stories, different interests, sometimes different levels, because it's art. You can never tell what would become a great film. People ask me, how do we know to select? And I'll tell you in a minute how we select. But after all, I always have 2 words coming up to me. It's Harry Potter. Harry Potter was rejected by dozens of publishers before one little publisher decided to take it. And the rest is history. So you cannot tell. It's in a way, it's, I wouldn't say gambling, but you pick your best choice, and you hope you didn't do wrong to a big project that was lost. Now, how do we do that? First, as I said, people are invited to file requests. It's only in Hebrew. So if you English speakers, you need an Israeli producer to assist. And by the way, could be served in Arabic too. We are the only fund that allows that.
Very nice.
And so when it's filed, and when you look at the website, you'll see a list, very short list of requirements. What do you have to file? You have to file a budget. You have to file a CV, etc. And of course, what are your plans, and what is the film about, and why do you do that? And here is your written pitch. In addition to that, you need to also add some materials. Now, the materials are very, very important. It's not that we are waiting for a, Hollywoodic, trailer, but it certainly should be interesting. And if it's not part of the film materials, you should explain yourself. Maybe it's research materials. Maybe it's only meant to show that you have an access, etc., etc. So it should be interesting. It should be clear. And one thing that I learned is that filmmakers not always write so fluently.
True.
So and maybe this is the reason I chose this medium. So guys, use somebody to read it for you. Maybe a lawyer. They write nicely. And so when you filed everything, then we collect all the all the crop of this round, and we select peer review group members, and we explain to them what they should do. And what they should do is review the materials and write a decision or a recommendation. As a recommendation, we give them a file very clear to help them, to go through. So first that we can compare, and second to lead them and help them to do it. But the film, the peer review group members that we select are the best in the industry, really. So I can certainly say, for example, for the Wild Block that is just now reviewed, I can tell you for the narrative film round, which is separate from the documentary, we have 2 peer review group members. One of them is Dr. Noah Regev, the head of the Jerusalem Cinematheque and Jerusalem International Film Festival, and the other one is Nir Bergman, the filmmaker who just won the filmmaking prize of the Israeli Academy Award. So serious people who are reviewing.
What are these people looking for in this
now?
Review
They
process?
need, what they look and what. Now, first, I'll tell you the formalities. They review it, they give their scores, then they sit together, they decide upon the approximately 20% films that will go to the second stage, and there some of those both producers and filmmakers will be invited to an interview, and then together with us we will the artistic manager, the production manager, and myself will decide together who will be the few that will get eventually the money. Now, what we look for is rather complicated, because you look for various things, and you consider various things, and actually it's a balance between different things that you consider. You consider how artistic it is. You consider how important is the story, how original is the story, how balanced is the story, how good is the shooting, how they see their ability to market. Did they get support from other organizations? Are they mature filmmakers? So what is their background? Are they do they belong to some minorities in society? So there are various issues that are considered, and we try to find the maximum.
Of course. I want to ask you about the mature versus immature filmmakers in terms of experience. Mm-hmm. How do you strike the balance between a mature filmmaker, somebody that has a lot of experience, versus an up-and-coming filmmaker that maybe doesn't have the experience, but certainly has, that fresh passion and fire that maybe a mature filmmaker who's more professional doesn't have? How do you, accommodate both of those, because they're both great, and you don't want to do only one or the other.
Right.
How do you strike that balance?
We meet emerging filmmakers usually in earlier stages. If they studied in film schools, we will see their proposals for short films. They probably have a short films with which they graduated from the school. So they can show some past record. This is one thing. The other thing is that we invest a lot in development projects. We really believe in development. We believe that development stage is exactly like when you build a house, then planning with the architecture is the most important thing. If you shortcut this, then it may collapse then.
Correct.
So don't run to shoot before it's well developed. Now, usually when people talk about development, they talk about getting 10,000 shekels and go and work in your mother's kitchen, and this is terrible. This is a recipe for disaster, we say in Hebrew. It rhymes in Hebrew. So it usually ends up with nothing. The money goes to the drain. So what we learned long ago is that the best is not to give money, but rather a support, professional support, and we accompany the filmmakers, and we have some very invested projects like that. One of our flagship projects is a seminar for emerging female filmmakers from various groups in society, and this lasts almost a year.
Wow.
Every year, 10 months, of work where every 3-4 projects are accompanied by one mature filmmaker, prominent filmmaker who supports them and accompanies them solely and as a group, and then the whole groups work together and help develop for each other. At the end, they have 3 like close seminars where they live together, eat together. I mean, now the coronavirus, but we hope that soon somebody will save us from that problem, and we'll come back, to this old system where people that we bring them together for 5-6 days. We pay everything, by the way. They don't pay anything. They don't pay hotels and not food and no transportations. One group, we had so many kids that we even brought a kindergartner to keep the children while the women worked. And I can tell you that this profound work, where they just including creating the best trailers, would bring them at the end of this project to a situation where they have what we call a production file. And this production file is in a very high level, which allows them, when they file a request for support for production of a film, to be good competitors to prominent filmmakers. So this is the way to strengthen them. And again, I can give you many examples, but one example is that at the end of the first year of this women producers, we had nine filmmakers. It was the first year. We was just learning it. So the whole year they studied together, 9 filmmakers, and soon after, like half a year after, 4 films were finished.
Wow.
And all the 4 were admitted to the competition, the main competition of the Dorit Film Festival, which is a very important film festival. I don't know if you know, but the winner in this festival is eligible for the American Oscars as well. If I recall, it's one out of 17 such festivals around the world, no more. And so all the 4 were admitted to the main competition, which was wow, it was because all of them were first or second film. All of them were young, and one of them won the first award. She was an ex-religious young woman. She made a film which is called The Wall, or Wall, sorry, not Wall, about the women's section of the Western Wall. It's an amazing, amazing film, and the last thing she could hope and we could hope for was first award. It was a very big deal. So, and this was the outcome of such a very, very invested work that we did. And this is something. All these projects are usually done with supporters and with organizations that are interested in that, strengthening the people. And I can tell you one more thing. Not all filmmakers will end up as filmmakers. Being a filmmaker for 40 years, it may happen, it happens. But so many people study filmmaking and they make a film, maybe 2, and then they go on. And so not all of them end up as filmmakers, but many of them, almost all of them, I dare to say, and especially the documentaries, are social activists. And they go back to their societies, and they go back to political work, and to municipal work, and to educational work. And they will make an impact everywhere they go, because they have this work, in their background. And this is so important.
Very interesting. I want to talk about the NFCT for a second. And, you've been around for about 25 years, more or less. Is that correct?
It was founded in 1994, so
1994.
it's like 26.
26
Yes.
years, excuse me. So 26 years, and how many projects have you supported up until now?
Above 900.
Wow, so
Yeah,
more than 900
portfolio.
projects over the course of 26 years.
Right. You can find most of them in our archive, in our website.
For sure, and we'll link that up in the bio. Let's talk about the future of the NFCT. How do you envision the next 3, 5, 10 years? What are some of the goals? What are some of the things that you see in that roadmap?
Not long ago, we had a minister of culture, who said just every time she gave an interview, she said, if I only had time, I would have shut down all the film funds in Israel.
Wow.
Yeah. But if you ask me what I plan that during the 5 next years, I will find that very wise foundation that will understand that investing $1 million every year for the next 10 years would not only build a very strong and healthy civil society in Israel and great art, the best art in the world, and provide so much work for so many people, it will also develop new industries in Israel. Just to give you an example, after we supported Walsh's Bashir, who also went to the American Oscars, I use it as a benchmark since they won so many other prizes as well. But after Walsh's Bashir, which was the first new genre, first in its new genre, which it invented, which was a documentary, animated documentary. So many other proposals we got animated, and animations is a very expensive production and very complicated and technical production, and there are many studios in Israel, and this is like an industry which just waits for the rain to come, in order to thrive and to create so many great materials. And these materials are really international materials. Animated materials are really international and can serve anywhere in the world. And it doesn't require a lot to create such new industry. When I came to this position of being the head of the Council for Cinema for cable and satellite television, at the year 1999 in Israel, there was no feature film made. There was one, and nobody saw it. It wasn't shown anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah. And one of my first decisions, and I was a lawyer, I remind you, I really didn't understand much in filmmaking. And one of my, 2 months after I arrived, I enforced the cable companies to invest in, I called it the movie of the month. 12 films, feature films a year. And everybody was shouting at me that I don't know nothing, and there are not enough scripts and not enough people in the industry, and I'm a stupid lawyer, which was the only thing I was willing to agree. And finally, I prevailed. And they had to do it in order to get so many other things that they did, and they really got, they were a monopoly at that time because the satellite television in Israel didn't launch yet. And so, and this was the hit, they did that. They invested in it. And the first year, 2001, there were 10 films. And the next year there were 14 films, full length. And people started going to the theaters and buy tickets for Israel. And it goes like that, TV theaters are shut down now. But when it was, and when it will open, you can check every week, every month, at least 4 or 5 films in Israel, standing, in the same line with Hollywood films, would be Israeli films, feature films, and people go and buy tickets and watch it. So it became a real industry, and so little money was needed to bring it. And so this is my belief, that if we find those people who are willing to invest, either as a business or as a mission,
or both,
they will get the rewards and the fruits and the great fruits out of this investment. Years ago, I visited Cambodia, and I happened to be in a evening run by the manager of a hospital, local hospital. He was a Swiss guy, a doctor, and he built this hospital. And every Thursday, he would have a concert for the tourists of that week. And he would play a cello, and he would speak up and tell the story. And at the end of his conversation, he said to the people, I would ask from the young tourists to donate blood because of the dengue fever. The children are dying there, and so we need blood donations. And from the old tourists, we would ask for money donations. And from those in the middle, we ask for both. So both is great. I have nothing to do with blood, but when we have, it's funny that half of our conversation, when I think about it, is dealing with money. But this is like the oxygen of the ability to make a real change, and it's very, very easy to make a change. It's amazing how little you need to make a huge, huge impact with films. So this is my plan. My plan is to make a huge change.
Sounds like we have a lot to talk about.
Yes,
if we haven't talked enough already, but Dorit, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for your time,
and
for allowing me to speak.
Absolutely. See you guys soon.
See you soon.